She told him exactly what she wanted, said the words pointed him in the right direction, and he still got it wrong. Not because he was clumsy, not because he didn't care, because he touched her body the way a 20-year-old wants to be touched. There's a map to a mature woman's arousal that no one draws for you. It does not start where you think. It does not build the way you assume. And it follows a sequence so counterintuitive that the men who stumble onto it by accident become the ones she never stops thinking about. By the end of this, you will know the 5 zones most men never discover. The neurological reason her body responds to a specific order of touch, and the one place rarely discussed, almost never targeted, that unlocks a physical response she cannot fake. But first, you need to understand why everything you've been doing has been working against her. Here is what nobody explained to you about female arousal after 30. It runs on 2 separate engines, not 1, 2. The first engine is the accelerator. Stimulation, touch, visual cues, the things that say go. The second engine is the brake. Stress, self-consciousness, distraction, mental clutter, the things that say not now. In a younger woman, the accelerator is loud, responsive, easily triggered. A look across a bar can start the engine. A new touch on familiar hands. The novelty alone carries the moment. The brake exists, but it's quieter, less dominant. In a mature woman, the ratio inverts. Her brake is stronger, not because she's less sexual, because her nervous system is carrying more responsibilities, histories, a body she spent decades negotiating with, former lovers who were careless, a culture that told her to perform pleasure, whether she felt it or not. The accelerator still works. It works beautifully, but it cannot outrun a brake that's already engaged. This is why your technique fails. You're pressing the accelerator while the brake is floored. You're stimulating a body that has not yet been given permission to feel. Emily Nagoski, the researcher who spent a decade mapping female arousal at Indiana University, found something that should have rewritten every piece of intimacy advice ever published. She found that for the majority of women, and the percentage increases significantly with age, desire is not spontaneous, it is responsive. She does not feel desire first, and then want to be touched. She is touched correctly, and then desire arrives. The touch comes before the wanting, not after. This demolishes the entire model most men operate on. They wait for her to seem turned on. They look for signals of existing desire. And when they don't see those signals, they assume she's not interested. She's not uninterested. She's unstirred. And unstirred is not the same thing. The man who understands responsive desire does not wait for her engine to start. He knows it starts through contact. Through the right kind of contact, in the right sequence, in the right zones, and that sequence begins somewhere that will surprise you. Before your hands ever reach her body, there is a gateway that most men walk past without knowing it exists. It is not a touch. It is not a look. It is your voice. Not what you say, how you say it. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the human body, runs from the brainstem down through the throat, the heart, the lungs, and into the gut. It is the primary conductor of the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for relaxation, trust, and arousal, and it is profoundly sensitive to sound, specifically to vocal frequency and prosody. Research from the University of Albany found that women rate men's voices differently depending on their hormonal cycle, and that low, resonant vocal tones are consistently associated with physical attraction and perceived dominance. But here is what most men miss. It is not volume. It is not depth alone. It is the pace. When you slow your speech, your nervous system signals to her nervous system that you are not anxious, not rushing, not performing. The vagus nerve is extraordinarily good at reading the vocal signatures of calm versus threat. It evolved to do exactly this. When you speak slowly, with pauses that you do not rush to fill, you are sending a direct signal to her parasympathetic system that says, there is no danger here. Her body will begin to shift before you have touched her once. This is why the men she describes as magnetic are rarely the loudest in the room. They are the ones who seem to have all the time in the world. And that quality, that unhurried certainty in the voice, is not charisma in the vague sense. It is neuroscience. It is the vagal signal of a man whose own nervous system is settled. And a settled nervous system is contagious. Lower your tempo before you lower your hands. The sequence begins with sound. In 1920s, Vienna, a physician named Wilhelm Reich was expelled from the psychoanalytic establishment for an idea that made his colleagues deeply uncomfortable. He proposed that emotional trauma is stored in the body, that the muscles, the fascia, the connective tissue, they hold memory, and he identified specific zones where this tension accumulates most intensely. The area he was most obsessed with was the sacrum, the small triangular bone at the base of the spine, just above where the body curves into the hips. Reich called it the seat of blocked surrender. Modern neuroscience has partially validated what he intuited. The sacral region is one of the densest clusters of parasympathetic nerve endings in the human body. The parasympathetic system is the branch of the nervous system responsible for rest, recovery, and arousal. When this area is activated through sustained warm pressure, the body shifts out of its vigilant state and into receptivity. This is not a massage technique. This is a neurological gateway. Place your open palm flat against the small of her back. Not moving, not rubbing, just holding. Firm, warm, still. What you're doing is deceptively simple. You're telling her nervous system, I'm not rushing, I'm not taking, I'm here. Within 60 to 90 seconds of sustained contact on this point, her parasympathetic system begins to engage. Her breathing will change, deepen, slow. Her shoulders will drop slightly. A tension she may not have known she was holding will begin to dissolve. She won't know why she's relaxing. She'll attribute it to the moment, the mood, you. She will not realize that you've pressed a physiological switch that most men never find because they are too busy racing toward the obvious. Sher Winston, in her anatomical study of female arousal networks, mapped how the nerve pathways from this sacral plexus connect directly to the pelvic region. The same nerve bundle, the pudendal nerve that governs genital sensation, originates from this cluster. When you activate the sacral gateway first, you're priming the entire downstream network before you ever approach it directly. You are waking up the wiring before you flip the switch. The men she remembers, the ones who made her feel things she couldn't explain, they touched here first. Whether they knew the science or not, they began at the base. They began with stillness, and her body did the rest. There is a reason that across centuries of art, from Bernini's marble sculptures to Klint's golden paintings, the exposed neck of a woman is depicted as the pinnacle of erotic vulnerability. It is not aesthetic preference, it is biological truth. The lateral neck, the sides, not the back, not the front, contains the highest concentration of C-tactile afferent nerve fibers outside of the forearms. These are specialized nerve endings that respond exclusively to slow, gentle touch. They do not register pressure. They do not respond to speed. They are calibrated for one thing only, the kind of touch that signals emotional safety and sexual intent simultaneously. When these fibers activate, they send a signal directly to the insular cortex, the part of the brain that processes emotional intimacy and physical pleasure as a single experience, not separately, together. This is why a woman can be touched on her neck by a stranger and feel violated, but touched on her neck by the right man and feel like she's melting from the inside out. The nerve fibers are reading context. They are interpreting intent through pressure, speed, and temperature. And when the reading is positive, the response is almost involuntary. But here is what most men get catastrophically wrong. They go for the back of the neck, the nape, because that's what they've seen in movies. The hand slides up, gathers the hair, grips the back of the neck. That is a dominant signal. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. It can work in the right context, but as an opening move, it triggers defense, not desire. The sides of the neck are different territory entirely. Use the backs of your fingers, not the pads, the backs. Trace from just below her ear downward along the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the long cord that runs from behind the ear to the collarbone, slowly, like you are reading Braille written on her skin. The speed matters more than the pressure. Research from the Touch Research Institute shows the optimal speed for C-tactile activation is approximately 3 centimeters per second, or roughly the pace of a slow exhale. Anything faster registers as functional, washing, wiping, accidental. This specific speed registers as intimate. A woman who has been touched like this does not forget the hand that did it. It prints on her sensory memory the way a melody prints on the auditory cortex. Months later, she will feel a phantom trace of those fingers, and her body will respond before her mind catches up. This is neurological inscription, and it starts on the side of her neck at 3 centimeters per second with the backs of your fingers. In Han-era Japan, roughly the 10th century, the court culture of Kyoto produced what is arguably the most sophisticated understanding of female desire in recorded history. Lady Murasaki, author of The Tale of Genji, described seduction scenes where physical contact was minimal, indirect, and devastatingly effective. In one passage, a nobleman touches a woman's wrist while adjusting her silk sleeve, just the wrist, and Murasaki describes the woman as being so affected that she cannot compose poetry for 3 days. This was not literary exaggeration, this was precision. The inner wrist is one of the thinnest skinned areas on the human body. The veins are close to the surface. The pulse is visible. Touching the inner wrist is at a primal level touching someone's lifeblood. When you hold her wrist gently with your thumb resting on the pulse point, you are creating a feedback loop. You can feel her heartbeat. She knows you can feel it. Her heart rate becomes information you both share. This creates a form of physiological intimacy that bypasses conversation entirely. If her pulse quickens under your thumb, she knows you know. That knowledge, that she cannot hide her arousal from you, is itself arousing. It is a recursive loop, desire amplifying desire. But there is a zone even less discussed than the wrist. The lateral ribs, the sides of the torso below the arms, above the hips. This area is almost never touched in daily life. Think about it. Hands shake hands. Arms hug shoulders. Fingers touch faces. But the sides of the rib cage, they exist in a tactile dead zone. Months, sometimes years, pass without meaningful contact here, which is precisely what makes them so potent. Jack Morin, in his research on the psychology of arousal, identified what he called the novelty gradient. The areas of the body that are touched least frequently produce the strongest neurological response when finally touched with intention. The brain registers the unfamiliarity. The sensory cortex, receiving input from a region it rarely maps, devotes disproportionate processing power to the signal. The result is amplification. The touch feels bigger than it is, more significant than it should be. When you run your hands along her lateral ribs slowly with open palms, fingers spread, you are touching a part of her that has been waiting without knowing it was waiting for exactly this. And here's the element that ties these zones together: breath. Mantak Chia, in his research on arousal cycles, demonstrated that female sexual response is inextricably linked to respiratory rhythm. When breathing is shallow and rapid, as it is during stress, performance anxiety, or being touched too aggressively, the arousal response stalls. It physically cannot proceed. The pelvic floor tightens. Blood flow to the genitals restricts. The body prepares for threat, not pleasure. When breathing deepens and slows, the opposite cascade begins. The pelvic floor relaxes. Blood flow increases. The clitoral complex, which is not a button, but an entire internal network of erectile tissue, begins to engorge. Your job before any explicit touch is to slow her breathing. The sacrum, the lateral neck, the inner wrists, the ribs, touched in this order, at this pace, do exactly that. They are a respiratory sequence disguised as foreplay. You are not arousing her through stimulation. You are arousing her by removing every obstacle between her body and its own capacity for pleasure. This is what Nagoski meant when she wrote that the key to female arousal is not adding more stimulation. It is removing the brakes. And the brakes release through breath, and breath releases through touch. And touch works in an order that most men have completely backwards. In 1966, researchers William Masters and Virginia Johnson published a study that reshaped the scientific understanding of human sexuality. But buried in their data, overlooked by the headlines that focused on orgasm mechanics, was a finding about the inner thigh that deserves its own chapter in the history of intimacy. They found that sustained light touch on the upper inner thigh, specifically the adductor region, the soft tissue approximately 4 inches from the groin, produced measurable genital vasocongestion in women, who reported no subjective arousal at the moment of contact. Their bodies were responding before their minds caught up. Blood was flowing, tissue was engorging, the physiological machinery of arousal was activating without the woman consciously feeling turned on yet. This is the definition of responsive desire made physical. The body leads, the mind follows, but the location is precise. Not the outer thigh, not the knee, not directly at the groin. The sweet spot exists in a narrow corridor of tissue where the adductor muscles meet the inguinal crease, the fold where the leg meets the torso. This region is innervated by the ilioinguinal nerve and the genital branch of the genitofemoral nerve. These nerves share pathways with the genital sensory system. Activating them is like tuning a radio to an adjacent frequency. The signal bleeds over. The technique is not what you expect. It is not stroking. It is not kneading. It is proximity without completion. Place your hand on her inner thigh, high, close to the boundary, and then stop. Don't move higher. Don't inch forward. Hold the position. What happens neurologically is extraordinary. The brain, anticipating escalation that does not arrive, begins to amplify the signal from the existing contact point. The sensory cortex allocates more and more processing power to the area being touched. The body, in the absence of progression, creates its own escalation internally. She's now doing the work you would have done inside her own nervous system. Her body is building the arousal itself. You merely held the door open. Here is a truth about restraint that most men never learn. Stopping is not weakness. Stopping is architecture. The moment you hold still at the edge of what she expects, you are not withholding pleasure. You are engineering it. The brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly running models of what comes next, and when what comes next does not arrive, it intensifies its focus on what is happening now. This is why a held note is sometimes more powerful than the melody that follows it. This is why the moment before the kiss can be more electric than the kiss itself. Every man who has ever stopped at the border and held there has watched something happen in the woman in front of him. Her breath changes. Her body moves, slightly, involuntarily, toward him. She is no longer passive. She has become active in her own desire. That shift, from receiving to reaching, is not a small thing. It is the difference between a woman who was touched and a woman who wanted. Between an experience she files away and an experience she returns to in her memory, alone, weeks later, wondering how a man can know her body better than she does. Lori Mintz, in her research on female pleasure, found that women who reported the highest levels of arousal consistently described a pattern. Their partners spent significantly more time on indirect stimulation before transitioning to direct contact. The ratio was roughly 4-to-1. 4 units of indirect, peripheral, almost their touch, for every 1 unit of direct stimulation. The men who rushed the ratio were rated as less skilled, less attentive, and less memorable, regardless of what happened after. The inner thigh is the final station before the destination. And the men who linger at this station, who treat it not as a checkpoint but as a landscape, those are the ones she replays in her memory at 1 a.m., months after they've parted. Here is what sits beneath everything you've just learned. A mature woman's body does not respond to enthusiasm. It responds to intelligence. It does not reward speed. It rewards sequence. It does not open for the man who wants her the most. It opens for the man who understands her the most. The sequence is architectural. The voice first, pace and tone that settles her nervous system before a single finger lands. The sacrum, second. Stillness, permission. The nervous system shifts from guarded to receptive. The lateral neck, third. Slow, intentional C-tactile activation. Emotional safety and sexual intent fused into a single signal. The inner wrists and lateral ribs, fourth. Novelty zones that amplify sensation and deepen breath. The inner thigh, last. Proximity without completion. The body builds its own fire. This is not foreplay. Foreplay implies a prelude to the real thing. This is the real thing. For a mature woman, this sequence is not the opening act. It is the main event. What follows is the consequence of what you built here. Esther Perel wrote that in long-term relationships, the greatest threat to desire is not conflict. It is the absence of erotic imagination. The couples who maintain fire are not the ones who have more sex. They are the ones who have more quality of attention during intimacy. That phrase should haunt you, because what you just learned is not a technique list. It is a philosophy of attention. It is the decision to treat her body not as a series of targets to be hit, but as a territory to be understood, to be read, to be honored with the kind of precision that tells her nervous system something her mind desperately wants to believe. This man is not performing. He knows. And there is one final thing to understand about how a mature woman remembers intimacy. She does not remember what you did. She remembers how she felt. She will not catalog the technique or recall the exact sequence. What prints on her emotional memory is the quality of presence behind the hands. Whether she felt rushed or received. Whether she felt like a body being used or a woman being known. The sequence you learned today is only half the story. The other half is the intention you carry into it. There is no neurological gateway you can activate with absent eyes and a distracted mind. She will feel the quality of your attention even before she feels your hands. And that quality, that complete, unhurried, intelligent focus on her specifically, is what makes the science work. Strip the attention away, and what remains is mechanics. Keep it, and what you have is something a woman will describe to her closest friend as unlike anything she has felt before. Not harder, not faster, not louder. Slower, smarter, deeper. And now you know where to begin. If you felt something shift while listening, if you realized you've been touching her body without ever reaching her, then you already know this channel speaks a language most never learn. If this opened something in you, if even one part of what you heard made you see a woman differently, press that like button right now, not as a favor to us. Because it tells the algorithm that this kind of content matters, that men who want to understand women, who want to be genuinely better rather than simply more aggressive, deserve a platform. Every like is a vote for that conversation continuing. And subscribe, because the next one goes deeper. We are going into the emotional triggers that most intimacy coaches are too afraid to discuss. The specific things a mature woman needs to feel in her mind before her body follows, and you will not find it anywhere else. To our Forged brothers who have been supporting this channel from the beginning, we see you and we thank you. Because of you, more men are learning how to attract women naturally, not through manipulation, not through performance, through genuine understanding. You are the reason this work continues, and you are the reason more men are waking up to a different way of moving through the world. We are just getting started. Stay forged.